Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, we talk on this show about crowdfunding, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, how to raise money, how to get funding for your dream. And more importantly, this entire show is based around you. You're basically like a fly on the wall, listening into these conversations of real world creators, entrepreneurs, artists, inventors, people who are designers that are coming out with new products. And they're just kind of telling you what's working with them, for them, how they're actually accomplishing these major raises, whether that's a 6-figure or 7-figure raise. You can go back in the archives of the show, either on iTunes. I really recommend actually listening on iTunes because you can literally listen on your phone, right? You can be running, you can be doing jogging and going and hiking or whatever you want to do. You can be listening to the show and you can be kind of learning at the same time, turning your life into a learning center. So I know it's kind of annoying sometimes to set that up, but if you go to crowdcrux.com/iTunes, crowdcrux.com/iTunes, you can start listening via iTunes if you want to on your phone, on your podcast app on your phone, which is super cool. Or you can go on Spotify and you can search me up, Salvador Briggman or Crowdfunding Demystified, and listen to the podcast there. So why is this so important? I was thinking about this the other day, and I think about it, I've done so many interviews, obviously, when it comes to this show. Hundreds of people that I've talked with when it comes to their campaigns, many more in terms of helping, in terms of experiencing many different launches, and also, coaching students and people who have read my books, Kickstarter Launch Format, all the other books that I've written, and the YouTube channel, etc. So I've touched or had my fingers in a lot of different pies when it comes to Kickstarter and crowdfunding. But I really always come back to this. Why do I do this show? And I always think about it and I try to should I even be putting out another episode? Haven't I covered this angle? And the more that I get into it, the more that I realize it's actually not about that, okay? What it's about is really getting into the right mindset. And here's why. When you don't see success, man, when you aren't seeing every single day signals of success, you start to doubt yourself. You start to question yourself. You start to wonder if I could actually come out with this new thing. And I think it's, toxic could be a great word to describe it, but I really think it's limiting. It's putting a glass ceiling on your dreams, putting a glass ceiling on what you're capable of. I'm talking about smashing through that ceiling, man, and absolutely blowing past your goal on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or another crowdfunding website. And I think that this is literally my duty in this industry, is to always be sharing these examples that are happening today, currently, success stories. Because the more you can feed your mind that other people are doing this, it's not rocket science. Other people just like you around the world, in the United States, but also in Europe, also in South Korea, also in Australia, also in China. So many people around the world are using crowdfunding and are using it successfully. And if this is your first project or your first campaign, it can be a little bit daunting. But the more you start to feed yourself, feed your mind with those success stories, the more it becomes like, you know what? Maybe I actually could do that. That is why this show is so important, and why, to me, it's a pillar, right? It's something that we always have to do. We always have to be putting out success stories, particularly for the beginners who have never experienced success thus far, because until you see someone riding a bike, you look at that equipment, you look at that machine, you're like, I don't know if I can actually ride that thing. Or before you see someone snowboard and you start falling down the first time you try it, you're like, oh, okay, this is a dumb activity. But had you actually seen that success story first, you would try again, and eventually you're just kind of carving down the mountain. You got the wind there, you got some snow, it's great. You can see all the mountains in the background, and you're snowboarding, man. And the only reason that you knew you could do it was you saw someone else who was having a heck of a good time on that mountain. You know what I mean? So that's why this show is so important. And if you want to support this effort that I have, number one, you got to join my newsletter where I put out weekly advice and tips for free, which you can check out at crowdcrux.com/newsletter. That is crowdcrux.com/newsletter, crowdcrux.com/newsletter. But number two, become an active member of this community. Become an active member. Go beyond just listening in and tuning in, being a fly on the wall. Really get active when it comes to comment sections, when it comes to kickstarterforum.org, my online forum, when it comes to really researching and learning the craft, learning the tools, investing in it, because you're already here. You're already here. You got an idea. You know you have something on your hands, right? Why not go all in? That's what I'm talking about. I lived in New York City for about 7 years of my life, and I came to Miami recently. I'm in Miami now. kind of expanding here, but also, I wanted to kind of get a lay of the land. I think it's growing a lot as a city. And the one thing I see is just so much opportunity is being missed all the time around us. So don't let that be you. Really sink your teeth into today's episode. Really try to listen to some of the other episodes we got out there and always be feeding your mind with this. So today we actually talked with a creator who created a really interesting filmmaking board game. Never heard about anything like this before, but you can actually kind of go through the process of making a film, but through a board game. And this individual attracted more than 3,000 backers, over $150,000 that they raised on Kickstarter. It's a current recent campaign. And in addition, this creator talks about how they had been struggling for a lot of times in their life, and finally something clicked. And they share with you exactly why it is they were able to just blow past their goals, smash their goal on Kickstarter, and get it out there for thousands of people to love around the world. So if that sounds like you, if you sound like you're really next corner, go around the right bend, you are going to seek success. You're going to hear from a story that kind of mirrors that exact trajectory. It's coming up after this. Thank you so much for listening. Let's get right into it. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured, I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. Fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today we are speaking with a really interesting tabletop game, board game. This is for Roll Camera, the filmmaking board game. Work together with friends to write, storyboard, shoot, edit, and premiere a quality movie before running out of time and money. Super interesting. And we have the creator here today, Mal, who's managed to attract more than 3,000 backers, over 150K raised. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. Where are you hailing in from, by the way?
I live in Berlin, Germany. I am German, but I grew up in the States. I'm also American. And grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I lived in LA, where I went to film school and worked in the film industry for a long time before coming here to Germany, where I also worked in film for many years, taught film. And that explains where I came up with the idea for Roll Camera.
What kind of stuff did you do?
And so mostly I was focused a lot on directing and writing. And then when I came here to Germany, I basically did it all myself. So I was doing a lot of producing as well, and also cinematography, which I didn't do much of when I was in LA, but I'd always been into photography. And so it wasn't like a huge leap. So I was doing a lot of, really small commercial shoots where it was me and a sort of skeleton crew of like maybe one or two other people plus whatever the cast was. Doing mostly like commercials, industrials, sometimes music videos here and there.
And along the way, have you always been interested in board games, or is this something new that you've been doing? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I played, chess. I played Magic the Gathering. My dad's German. And and my dad's German. And so he would always, like around the house, we'd always have these kind of odd games. Like we never played Monopoly or Sorry or Risk or anything. We always played like Mensch ärgere dich nicht or like Fang den Hut and like these kind of weirdo like German games that nobody else had. So we did play like a little bit of those growing up, but filmmaking was always my like number one thing. And then when I moved to Europe, I started doing a webcomic because just kind of out of interest, I've always kind of been doodling and doing my own kind of little cartoons and comics. And I thought, well, this would be an interesting way that's not a blog to like account of my experiences as an American living in a foreign country, learning foreign languages and kind of dealing with different cultures and so on. And the comic took off, and the comic became way more popular than it's called Itchy Feet, the travel and language comic. And it became way more popular than any film work I ever did. And I always just considered it a kind of side, just kind of whatever. It's a kind of a side thing. And that maybe someday I could leverage the audience for use in making a film. And one day I was talking with a friend about what I could do in terms of merchandise for the comic. So, T-shirts and mugs. It was kind of boring and I didn't really want to do that. I mean, that's just kind of junk, in my opinion. But he said card game. And at the time, right around that time, the same friend and this little group of friends I had there introduced me to sort of modern board gaming by way of Pandemic Legacy. So Pandemic Legacy, the season 1, was my first like modern board game. It was my first co-op game. I didn't even know that was a thing. And it was my first legacy game. So it was like this, I mean, my mind was completely blown by this game. And I didn't say like, I don't know, it kind of brought me back to, I just loved getting around the table and being away from the screen. I like working together because as a filmmaker, it's kind of, in the sort of work blood of that industry is teamwork. And so when he said make a card game, I was like, yeah, how hard can that be? Turns out it's very hard. And so I brought on a game designer who was a reader of the comic. His name's Maxime Rioux. He's from Quebec. And he and I co-designed Itchy Feet, the card game, which was my first Kickstarter back in 2017. And then after that, I thought it was going to be a one-off. Like I didn't expect it to be very successful, honestly. Like I thought I would, sell to maybe 10% of the followers I had, and it would, I'd raise maybe 10, 15 grand. And that would be like a little fun little side thing. I could see how the Kickstarter works and so on. But again, like I was never really thinking about doing board games professionally. I was a movie guy. And then that campaign ended up raising $113,000. And I just thought, like, that's insane. Like, that's crazy. Again, nowhere near like anything I'd made on any movie projects off of a single project, like just not comparable. And so then I started thinking like, well, my wife basically told me one day, like, you would be stupid, not to do another game.
Always the one to tell you when you're going to be stupid.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, exactly. And then I struck upon the idea one day of a filmmaking board game, and it seemed so obvious when I hit upon it, because when you're making a film, you're working in a specified area, like a limited area. You're working with people who have specific roles that kind of have special abilities. Everybody's kind of more or less on equal ground, like trying to get this thing done. Like, yes, the director has more creative input and has like more power in that sense, but everybody kind of has a very important role to play. You're like moving physical objects like lights and sound and sort of props and furniture around in a way that's very similar kind of to like moving pieces around a board. Plus you're working under limitations of time and resources, which is very similar to what a lot of board games offer. And so I thought, like, this is so obvious, like surely someone else has thought of this, and nobody had. There are a lot of filmmaking, like film studio management competitive games where it's like, oh, you kind of put a picture together from like a very high level view. But I wanted a game about shooting a film, like where you're actually on set, putting the shot together. And like, that was my world for a long time. And so that's where the idea for Roll Camera came, where I kind of then put that together and, I thought, well, this is an obvious fit for me. Like I know everything about, everything. I am experienced in making films and have a lot of experience in that area. And also I've done a game now, so I can kind of translate that to the board game space. And yeah, worked on it for several years. And then last summer launched it. And now, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, first of all, I think that's so cool that you can kind of learn a bit about filmmaking by playing a game. But I think a lot of people will have that idea and get a little bit too logical about it, right? And be like, oh, okay, so you should make a course or a class or something. But you were able to make it fun and interesting. Like, how did you bring out some of those elements in the game to make it more of like an entertaining experience versus just learning?
That's a good point. I definitely didn't want it to be an educational game, and I don't have anything against education. I mean, like I said, I was teaching film for many years, so I was like, I understand the value of education. To me, it's a game first. Like it should be fun first as a game for people who don't know movies, and then after that point, like, and it should also, like, I guess this is where we talk about games being thematic, and there's a phrase that gets used in filmmaking, it's called the promise of the premise. It's a great little like term. And what that means is that if you tell somebody, if you sit down, if you see a poster for a film and on that poster there's a pirate, you expect to see some pirates in that movie, and you expect that those pirates are going to fight each other and they're going to do piratey things. And like, that's the least you expect, right? And so that's the premise. The premise is like, there is a pirate and it's like a piratey movie. So the promise that that movie has to deliver on is that like there's going to be piratey stuff. We promise. That's what the poster says. It has a pirate on it.
Gotta
So
have a parrot.
that,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and so like there are movies which I'm sure you've seen that don't, where it like sells one thing, like promises one thing and does not deliver on that promise. It's saying that the premise is going to be this, and then it sometimes in a good way can like take you on a different journey, like From Dusk Till Dawn. But which, if anyone's seen that film, like it starts out as one movie, one genre, and then halfway through it completely changes. But I think in games you need there's the when we talk about theme, that's kind of what it's the premise. We're talking about the setting. We're talking about like what you can expect in this game to feel like doing, like you are doing, like make the decisions which are analogous to the decisions that you would be doing in X scenario of whatever the theme is. And I think games that are more thematic are delivering more on that promise, and games that are, you might say more pasted on themes, which are more surface level themes, are not delivering on that promise, or maybe, I don't know, it depends on, I like plenty of abstract games, but I think the ones that don't promise more than they deliver are going to be
It feels
received better.
off. Yeah. And I would think too, like, you're leading up to this campaign and you have this idea, you're executing on it. You've already done one, so you know a bit about the work that's involved. Like, there might also be some hesitancy or uncertainty about, will my audience care about this? Because like it's a completely different type of game than your other game, it seems. Like the other game was a travel game, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I kind of was, well, so Itchy Feet, the comic, is drawn with this like bean character style. This is sort of like blob-like stick figure kind of characters. And my thinking was, okay, Roll Camera is about making films, and the comic Itchy Feet is about travel and language learning. Those two things are not connected in really any meaningful way. And so I thought, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll draw Roll Camera in the same style, more or less. It's like very similar style to Itchy Feet. And I will inject the same kind of sense of humor. So it'll be kind of a comedic, light kind of game. And I was and during the Itchy Feet campaign, one of the things that I did was I posted a comic every day. So normally I post a comic every week, and I've been doing that for the last 10 years. Once a week on Sundays, I'll release a new comic. And during the campaign for that month, though, I did one every day. There were one panel comics, but there was every single day, and it was like a promotional effort I was trying to like push for the game. And so I thought maybe that was why. And so I posted. What I did during the Roll Camera campaign was I temporarily turned my comic into a filmmaking comic. I said, okay, for this month, Itchy Feet is like on hiatus, and instead we're doing Roll Camera. And I did twice weekly filmmaking comics. And there was such little interest from my audience. It was shocking. I really thought, I don't know, part of me just thought that, if you're subscribing or following to the work I'm doing, that like you're going to kind of vaguely be interested in whatever it is that I'm doing. And that is not true.
Audience is brutal. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I don't blame them, Itchy Feet, they're not there for me. I'm not famous. I'm not someone that's like the majority of the followers are following because it's me. They're following it because the comic speaks to them and the comic speaks to their experiences. And Roll Camera just has nothing to do with that. And so the very small overlap between those two audiences did convert, but I have like it was something like 7% of people. And I know that because in the end I did a survey after the campaign was over, and I kind of asked people, can you tell me where you found out about this game, because it's really important to me as a creator. And it's something, by the way, that I think if you're a smaller creator or kind of doing it all yourself, kind of like I was, I think it's important to appeal to backers, like to show your human side, to show your face, in a way, and say like, look, it's me. I'm just one guy or girl, or we're a small team, or whatever it is, and really show who it is that's working on this thing. You're not hiding behind, you're not trying to pretend you're a corporation. You need to lean into that, the human side, because then people will, I think it's a strength.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, people are obviously supporting you as a creator, and they're supporting what you make, and I think it adds a lot of transparency, right? To be able to see that there is a real person behind it. So when you kind of had that realization of like, oh man, not as many people from my audience are checking this out as I think, what was sort of like the next thing there? Was there panicked? Were you like, okay, now we got to figure out another way to promote this? How did you feel?
I mean, luckily I didn't have all my fish in that barrel. Is that the expression? I didn't have all my eggs in that basket. So it was one of my many like strategies, was like, trying to attract the Itchy Feet audience. But I obviously had other routes that I was going for. I had built up on Board Game Geek, which, as you know, is the like main board game website. I had started to build up a kind of small, but ended up converting higher than the people from Itchy Feet. So it was obviously a little bit more helpful. Following just through like posting about the game and kind of doing development diaries and getting feedback and so on. I would post artwork on Facebook groups and on Reddit and kind of just, the kind of thing where you go like, which is better, A or B? And I think the theme was unique enough that people kind of is stuck in people's minds. And so I think that did much more than Itchy Feet did. I think what Itchy Feet gave me was credibility because I had one Kickstarter under my belt that was a card game that had funded high, pretty high, and had delivered successfully and people were happy with it. So I think that helps a lot. It wasn't my first project. I think it goes a long way.
As one quick follow-up, I think a lot of people who want to promote their work the way that you did on Board Game Geek or on Facebook groups kind of shy away from it because a lot of these groups seem to really cut down on like your promotion and they don't want creators to do it as much. Was there a way you got around that? Did you talk with the organizer? Like, how did you navigate that?
I think the trick, so there's a difference between marketing and advertising. So advertising is like putting up a poster, it's putting up a Facebook ad, and it's also, in my opinion, going onto some of these groups and going, hey, check out my Kickstarter project, please support, the thing. Marketing is appealing to your market. Imagine that there's like a farmer's market and you are a farmer. That's the market where you need to be. And those are the people who are looking for the thing that you are selling. If you're a farmer's market and you're going to a jewelry fair, you're going to have a hard time because those people are not there for vegetables. And so it's similar. Marketing is just finding the people who are going to be interested in the thing you're interested in and appealing to them, in my opinion, transparently and honestly, and like the way you would, want to be marketed to. We are consumers. There are things out there we want to know about, things we like, and we want to hear about them, but we don't want to be sold, in a way. We want to be told about it. We want to be informed about it. And that's kind of how I approached it. So when I went into these Facebook groups, I'm not like, yes, there is a promotional part of it. And I am trying to get people interested in the campaign, but I'm genuinely trying to find people who would like the thing. And importantly, dissuade people who would not be interested in the thing. So like a big part of the marketing that I do if you look at my page or if you look at the way that I've built the messaging that I do, it's just as much about like, if this is what you're interested in, this is what I'm doing. And also, if that's not what you're interested in, don't get it. I don't want people to buy my game who are going to get it and be like, this sucks. This is what I don't want this kind of game. It's like, yeah. Then that means I haven't done my job in like telling them be clear enough with them about what it was that I'm doing. So going into these groups, it's like you follow the rules. Look at what the group wants. If the group is a group of artists, ask them about art, get tips on art, and you have to be genuine about it. That's the trick. Like you have to really want that, and you have to give that back too. It's not just about taking. It's not just about getting from them. And also on BGG, it's also about giving back and giving comments and giving feedback and advice and thoughts and time, time playtesting other people's games, time looking through other people's rule books. It's sort of the pay it forward approach where you have to, invest that up front and then it will pay dividends later. But
for sure. Yeah. I think that's a huge thing, like you said. And also it's like, a lot of people think they have a megaphone. You're just like shouting for people to check it out. Right. But it's more of almost like a dialogue that you're kind of having a little bit.
Yes. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. The other thing when I was looking through your campaign that really stood out to me is just you have some really interesting, very cool rewards, which it looks like you've thought out pretty carefully. What's sort of your approach to putting together rewards that seem interesting, exciting to be a part of?
Yeah, it's a good question. With Itchy Feet, I kind of threw everything in the kitchen sink at the campaign and just to kind of see what stuck. I did some research beforehand, but I did a lot of stuff in there that I don't know that I would do again. And with Roll Camera, even there, like I did this one which was a customized piece of art. So a card that had your likeness in it. And not that would print with everybody's game, but that it was something that would ship separately. That way I didn't want to wait for people to send me their portraits before everybody could get their games. So I did it as like a separate process. And that one was pretty popular. What really surprised me about that one actually is that like I basically doubled the amount that it cost to pledge for that reward, because I did the same thing in Itchy Feet and the same thing on Roll Camera. And on Roll Camera, I basically doubled how much it was because it was a lot of work. I was like, well, I want to price it at what it's worth for me to do. And it sold out within the first day. And I was like shocked. And so I feel like with that kind of stuff, I guess I underestimated people's interest in that kind of a thing, even with my art style, which is not the most technically like proficient. Like it's definitely kind of a weirdo little cartoony style. But I guess the takeaway for me there was you want to find ways that people will personalization of anything on Kickstarter is really valuable, because if you think about it, that's why people come to Kickstarter. And what any crowdfunding platform really is, what crowdfunding is about is like, it's not that you're buying a product. I mean, yes, there's an argument to be made that like that's exactly what Kickstarter is, to become a store. But I think the opportunity you as a creator can take is like to take advantage of the fact that people are coming in like a really creative part where they can like contribute to the game being made, and they can be a part of the creation of it. And I think if you can leverage that, that's a great place to be on Kickstarter. That's why I love Kickstarter. That's why I would never want to open up a shop to sell my stuff, because then people don't get involved in it. They're not part of the process. They're not part of the creation of the thing. I think that's the magic that crowdfunding allows for, is being a part of that process.
The other thing I really like is just looking down your page. When I look at the rewards, I look at all of the things that are in the box. It feels fun. So I don't know how to describe it, but it almost looks like it's 3-dimensional, right? Like you can see the way that the table, the boxes, and also the different cards, and they're not just aligned in like vertical fashion. They're all like, there's this angle that they're on, and it looks really fun. It almost like comes off the page.
Yeah, and of course that's quite intentional. I don't know that I've got it down to a science or anything, but I try to put things together that would appeal to me and that are fun for me to make. If you're having fun, then your backers will have fun too. And I think what's really important to mention here is that it's not a good idea, in my opinion, if you're starting out and you want to like launch a Kickstarter, to look at what other pages are doing and copy them exactly. So it's not going to do you any good, probably, to go through and copy like the type of campaign that I ran, because the campaign that I ran plays to my strengths personally, because I'm trying to leverage those strengths and I'm trying to kind of avoid my weaknesses. And I have lots of weaknesses. And so what's really important for you to do is know what you're good at, and know what your strengths are and where your skills can be best applied, and go for that. So like if you love, and it really that comes down to like, what do you love and what are you like super passionate about, and like where do you get excited and what makes this fun for you, and put that up front, put that on the front of the page. So you'll notice that like the top of the page of both Itchy Feet and Roll Camera don't say anything about the game. They make this big, broad statement, and both of which have to do with kind of bringing people together. And that's because that's where all of this for me comes from. And I'm putting that right up front and center. I'm saying like, this is me. And I think that's important to identify what is it that you love about what you're doing, and what is it that you're passionate and excited about, and like let the way that you talk about that be infused by that. So if you're a very serious, grim person and you really enjoy like bloody, gritty, dark, post-apocalyptic, miserable fiction, and that's just something that you like really love and get into, like just put that all over the place, because there are other people like you and they love that too, and they're going to love that you love it. And that's where that magic thing is. So like, yes, my campaign, I think I lean a lot on fun, but that's because for me, like, this is a game. So for me, all of this is like just
it's play. Yeah, it's like a big sandbox.
Play.
Right? Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly right. And so I'm putting that up front because I think it's where, when I get excited, I think I can bring other people in that way. And I'm not a particularly extroverted person. I know that talking about it in this way is where I'm being most authentic, basically.
At what point did you know that this was going to take off? Because obviously you took a bunch of risks here, working on a game that is a different genre, working on something where your original audience might or may not be interested. When did you know like this one had really struck a chord with?
I'm actually quite risk averse, as much as it might seem otherwise from like running a crowdfunding campaign, which initially seems like quite a risky thing. But for me, it's actually kind of a no-brainer, because I knew I mean, with roll camera, yeah, it was a risk in the sense that I didn't know for sure if the audience would convert, although I was much more confident before I started. And I also knew that the theme was something that was going to interest people because I was already getting lots of feedback from people going like, oh, wow, filmmaking is a board game. I've never seen that before.
I mean, you obviously you got past your goal pretty quickly here, and then you started
Yeah.
going up and up. But even in the last week, like you grew a ton, man, in the last week as well with this campaign.
Yeah, well, that's how campaigns, Kickstarter campaigns have this kind of suspension bridge. If you like look at each day, the amount that it brings in, like it's a lot up front, it like sags in the middle, and then there's a lot towards the end. And I think that's just because people, get in at the last second when they've like decided, because Kickstarter will send out reminder emails as well, like 24 hours left, 8 hours left, which I think accounts for that end bump.
How do people react to this who, know you in your personal life? Because you were doing filmmaking and now you're doing something completely different and you're smashing these goals, right? And you also have this great comic that you're doing. And it sounds like this is your full-time gig as well, right? How are people react to it?
As of a couple of weeks ago, yeah, actually, I quit my job and where I was teaching filmmaking and also not just that, but you're right. Like, I think for me, I don't know. It's even hard for me to say now that like this idea that I'm not going to be making films, I'm going to be making board games. Like I was making films when I was 10. Like I was also always Mr. Movie Director. Like that was me. That was my career path since I was a kid.
You obviously have a gift for this. I mean, I'm sure you're pretty gifted on the film side too, but you definitely have a gift for this.
Well, I think I had a lot of skills I built up over years in different fields that I think I kind of realized like all work together here in crowdfunding for board games, like this very specific niche. I have like a lot of the skills required to be able to pull some of that stuff up just from like random stuff I've been doing over the past, 20 years of my life. But it's been, most of my friends and family have been super supportive and nobody seems to mind or nobody makes fun of me. But inside, I do feel a little bit like, yeah, I don't know. Filmmaking is, let's be honest, like being a movie director is it's like a rock star job. Being a board game designer has a different sound to it. So I'm still like grappling with the what, my self-image is, but you're right. I have like I said, I've found far more of a following and an opportunity for creative expression and a place to actually make a living through this than I ever did with filmmaking. So I feel very lucky and I'm really happy to have found this.
Yeah. I'm sure. So I just have one or two more questions
Sure.
for you here. So, one of them is you mentioned these skills that really help out for a beginning creative type in the audience. What do you think are some skills that they should really be working on if they want to aspire to doing big campaigns like this?
Well, one of the things so one of them is this idea of transparency that we were talking about. And it's harder than it sounds and this is a skill that I built with the comic that I had been doing. So I, put out this comic and then I was able to interface with people and with fans of the comic over many years and I kind of build up a kind of personality. Like I started to figure out how to interface with people, how to deal with trolls, how to deal with just people who are offended at work sometimes that you make, which happens. And also people who really love the stuff that you do, like to an insane degree to some with some people. So I learned how to kind of have a public face, which is not easy. It's very easy. If anyone's ever texted before, it's very easy to come off poorly on the internet, as everybody knows.
Yeah.
And I think it's a skill to come off well, and so that's one thing. If you're gonna put yourself forward as like the creator of this, you have to be a personality, and or create one, or not create one because it sounds artificial. You have to be able to authentically portray yourself and, be the bigger person when things get crappy, as they often do online, and like
be deliberate. Yeah.
And know how to engage with people. That's definitely one thing. Another is being able to read the room. And I don't mean that so literally, but like, and this is just as much a business skill as it is a creative one. But when you're creating something, you have to be able to, and especially if it's a community you're new to, like I was to board games, you have to be able to you have to research. You have to know what people want and what they don't want. So I had to do a lot of research into cooperative games, and like, Itchy Feet has a lot of features that are not, they're sort of out of vogue. They're frowned upon in like modern board gaming, which I just didn't know about. And so when it came to roll camera, I did a lot more research and learning about what games are coming out, what features do they have, what things are people complaining about, what things are people excited about. I would follow a lot of campaigns. I would follow a lot of like Kickstarter threads on Reddit and on Facebook just to see like what's the conversation about. And so that when you bring your thing in, you are participating in that conversation. You're not like the guy who like shouts some inappropriate joke in the middle of the room and everything, but he kind of goes silent and sort of looks at you.
Yeah, it's almost like you're calibrated. You took the time to learn your craft, right? That's kind of how it is.
Yeah, and read the sort of the marketplace so that you know that your idea has a place, and it's not just, you're not just throwing something out there and expecting that people are going to care about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so important as well. Like you talk about films or movies or books, the first writer who thinks he's going to like invent a new genre, and you're like, no, you got to learn what like the greats have done so far, right? Or learn about filmmaking techniques before you go out there and just try to make a movie from scratch, right? So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. My other question for you, and, just have one more after that, is when it comes to this, you've been able to get a tremendous amount of success online, it seems to me, and you've been able to tap into something that's greater than you. And from just listening to you talk, it sounds like that all started with the decision to just kind of put yourself out there, right? And also, I'm sure you're drawing on these skills of organization you built up in the movie industry. Do you think that's really what got you to where you are today, just putting yourself out there, or is it something else?
That's a really good question. And you know what, it brings me to something I don't often talk about, but is so, so, so important. And that is, the reason why Itchy Feet as a comic took off is because I was communicating something authentically about my lived experience. And I wasn't just making a comic because it's fun to make a comic. And this is why, in my opinion, my career, like as a filmmaker, never took off, because I never had something I wanted to say with the medium of film. Instead, I was making films because it's fun. It's so much fun. I love it. Like filmmaking is the best. But I never felt like it was a place where I was trying to express something that was about me artistically, or just about your own experience. Like that's what, so when you say putting yourself out there, emphasis on the yourself, because you have to bare yourself to the world. You have to, Hemingway said, writing is easy. You just sit down at a keyboard and bleed. And I'm not trying to compare myself to Itchy Feet to, For Whom the Bell Tolls. But the point is that like with board games, I understand now that what I'm trying to do is like express something. I'm trying to get something. I'm trying to get people to feel something. And I was never able to do that with film. So if you love board games and you want to make a board game, or you love anything and you want to do it because it's fun and because like you want the challenge and so on, I think that's not enough. I think what you have to do, you have to start from is a place of like, I want people to feel something. I want them to think about something. I want them to, to have a certain experience. Because if you don't do that, then you're just going through the motions of it. You're just doing it mechanically. And that's just never going to take you to that like next level, in my experience, anyway.
Well said. Yeah, I love that, man. I think it's a great place to end the show. Also, where can people go and learn a little bit more about some of the stuff that you have coming out? And also, just really quickly, also, you guys, I definitely recommend also going and checking out the actual Kickstarter, the filmmaking board game roll camera. Super cool design, really interesting characters. So it's awesome. But where can people go to learn more?
Yeah. And so I started a company called Keen Bean Studio, which you can find at keenbean.studio or rollcameragame.com. Just redirects there anyway. I have a new Kickstarter launching on October 5th, which is the expansion for Roll Camera. And it's also a reprint. So if you're interested in getting the game, you can do it there. And I'm on Instagram at keen.bean.studio and also on Twitter at Itchy Feet Comic. I do a comic every week.
Awesome. So my final question for you is, if you could speak directly to the listeners and you can leave them with either word of encouragement, final tip, something you wish you knew before you got started, anything like that, we can just end there.
I would say something we didn't talk about, but it's really also very important is learn to take feedback, specifically criticism, because criticism is feedback. Even if someone's saying, I hate this, I never want to play this again. If you can learn how to not just take feedback, but seek it out, like be hungry for feedback, that is the most important skill that any creative can have, in my opinion, and in my experience teaching hundreds of students and working with hundreds of professionals, like those who seek out feedback and listen to it. That is a fantastic skill that will serve you well.
Well said, Mal. Thank you for coming on the show, and good luck with your upcoming campaign.
Thanks. This was super fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. First of all, I really value your time, so thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I hope you took away some good tactics, strategy, tips, and tools that you can apply to your actual crowdfunding campaign. And also got a little bit of an inspirational story, which is a nice side bonus as well to listen to the episode. But I go back to what I said in the beginning. Mindset is the most important thing. You take any kind of professional athlete, you take any kind of person who has achieved a noteworthy status in any arena, and they'll tell you it's about being in the right mindset. And here's why. When you're in that mindset of focusing on opportunity, you're going to look at possibilities versus if you're scared and you're cowering in the face of greatness, in the shadow of greatness. I think it's important to be aware of these things. I think it's important to share the major pitfalls. It's why I wrote my book, The Kickstarter Launch Formula. It's why I put out content just like this for free. I want you to be aware of the pitfalls. I'm not talking about blindly leading you down a path where there could be pitfalls. You got to be aware of this stuff. But the number one thing that's going to hold you back is not the fact that there are pitfalls. There are always obstacles, my friend, in life. There are always problems that you have to solve. That's where success comes from. Success comes from solving problems, doing difficult things, and understanding how to apply frameworks to these solutions. So what do I mean by that? Like frameworks and etc. There is a particular path that goes into launching a Kickstarter campaign. It is proven. I've documented time and time again on these episodes. I've documented it in my book, on my YouTube channel, in my courses, etc. Now, some of you out there are like, okay, like I understand what you're saying and I do appreciate the education and I really appreciate this, but Sal, I just really don't have the time. Really do not have the time for this. I would love it if you could just tell me as it is. So for you, probably the easiest thing you're gonna do is just book a coaching call with me. You can go to crowdcrux.com/coaching, crowdcrux.com/coaching, book a coaching call with me, and we can go through an intensive coaching call when it comes to your specific project and category and exactly what you gotta do to be successful. But for some of you out there, that might be useful, and also you're gonna learn a ton, and I'm gonna introduce you to stuff that you've never seen otherwise when it comes to tools and just even resources in this industry. So that's great. But some of you are like, you know what, I wanna even go a layer deeper. Like I actually want to study this craft. And the reason why you might wanna do that is if you're trying to launch multiple campaigns, or you wanna understand the craft of marketing so that when you launch your actual e-commerce biz, or you launch that tabletop game biz publishing company, or you even launch this product and start selling it in retail, that you understand the mechanics of how this works. So that's exactly why I wrote the book, The Kickstarter Launch Formula. And it might seem strange to you why I'm recommending my book over the coaching. It's because I like to talk with people who are educated and who understand the techniques and tactics that I go through. It's actually easier for you, but also you're gonna get way more out of it. And I'm just not having to parrot as well some of the more basic stuff that I could be teaching you in my book. So if you want to check out that book, The Kickstarter Launch Formula, you can go to this link and you can listen to the Audible version. You can go to crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That's crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. And I believe that you can also get a free 30-day trial of Audible when you go and check that out if it's your first time buying an audio book, which is pretty cool, pretty neat. So this is kind of, to me, the beginning first step. Now, some of you also might be a little bit further along and you might be like, okay, I understand this. I understand now. I'm hearing the success stories, man. Like, I get it. What do I have to do next? What is the next action item? Here's my question for you. What currently is holding you back in your life? From where you want to go, what is holding you back? What is that thing you have to traverse? And usually there's a little bit of fear that's associated with that. You feel a little bit of uncertainty. It's like, part of me wants to go and try that thing, but the other part wants to run the other way, right? Part of you wants to fight, part of you wants to flee. And it's because it's scary and it's unknown and you're not sure. Identify what that is. Identify it. And if you can, it's going to be so much easier to solve that problem. Plow ahead, launch this campaign, get a bunch of funding, and become a success story. And you come and approach me and we do a show together. I've had a lot of actually people who have come back on this podcast and will do a show with me. And it's fun. I love it. I love these success stories. I love showcasing people who have already been successful. From listening to the podcast, they come back. It's almost like karma. I don't know if you believe in karma or the universe or all those different, crazy, wacky rules and stuff, but I'm a believer in karma. That's one of the reasons I put out good stuff. I really do believe in karma. And how cool would that be if you come back to the same podcast and you share your success story? That's what I really want for you, man. Anyway, my name is Sal. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I will see you next time.